Good morning, everyone. My name is Maya Luria with TMC for Seniors. And today we are going to be focusing on brain health, continuing on from our last month. And we have Improve Your Focus, Memory, and Motivation. I know a lot of you know Jill Jones. She is here with us today. And Michelle Clark is also with her. She'll be assisting during her presentation and probably a little bit afterwards. But I just want to thank you for being here, Jill.
Oh, I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
So I'm going to go ahead and put your PowerPoint up for you so that you can go ahead and get started. And then if anyone watching from home has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And I will ask Jill and Michelle those questions at the end.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here in person and online. Today's presentation is about how to improve our thinking skills. And that's things like our memory, our ability to concentrate, and even our ability to motivate ourselves to want to learn, to want to do new habits. Oops. This is an outline of today's talk. We'll probably have a few people coming in the beginning here. But anyway, here's the outline, and I'm going to go over each of these during the presentation, and then Michelle will pick up when I finish, and she will do a case study with you and try to lock in some of the concepts that are presented today, and so that you're able to use them and you see how they apply to your daily lives. So the first part is, well, what happens structurally to our brain as we get older? We hear a lot about our brain shrinking. Well, what does that mean? How much does it shrink? What's normal? What parts of the brain are involved? And then also, what does that mean to our critical thinking skills, like our ability to concentrate, our working memory, our ability to recall information? Then the next part is what circuits, what neural circuits and what chemicals underlie those particular skills in our brain. Now, with the advances in all of the imaging technology that's out there, researchers can look at our brain in real time and see specific neural circuits in our brain for working memory, for instance, or even for motivation. And then what can we do to slow down the aging process, and well, how can we improve these specific skills? So once we know these circuits that are involved, we have targeted daily habits that can actually improve those specific skills. And one of them is only 30 seconds, and we're actually going to practice that one here in class. So has anybody seen an image like this of a brain before? Well, this happens to be a picture of a 30-year-old and a 70-year-old healthy brain. So even though the 70-year-old looks like that, it's still considered healthy. No psychological problems, no clinical problems at all. That is considered normal brain aging. And what happens to our brain is every 10 years, so every decade after age of 40, on the average, it shrinks about 5%. So I know that's a lot. So by the time you're 70, we've lost 15%, and then 80, of course, we've lost 25%, and that's on average. But what that means is we've lost the connections between neurons. One single brain cell, one neuron, is connected to up to 10,000 other neurons. So we have a lot of those connections in our brain, and that's what we lose when our brain is shrinking. Well, what does that mean to our cognitive skills and our ability to be independent? I don't know if you've seen this chart. I've used this chart in other presentations. But if you can see here, this is
It wasn't on there, it wasn't on here. But I copied it out.
right here, this is about age 40 over here. And at age 40, our brain is still pretty much similar to what the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds are. It hasn't gone down a whole lot. But as you can see, as we get over here, if you watch the lines going down, the trajectory here, once we get into our 60s, that's when things really start to change. You can see a steep decline here starting about the age of 60. And these two dotted lines over here, that's normal brain age. That's considered normal aging. And so that's a pretty wide gap. And a lot of that depends on our daily habits. So the whole goal is, of course, is this line here is called the functionality threshold. That means we're still able to function on our own pretty much independently. So what our goal here is to move ourselves by our daily practices, by our habits, is to stay on a curve so that we can live on our lifespan and not fall below that line. So not lose function, be able to live independently. And when researchers put a person in a scanner and they look for different parts of the brain, see how different parts of the brain are work, different circuits. They also do tests. They test people to see these particular skills, because these skills are an indication how well we do on a test and what we look like in a scanner. That's an indication of how quickly our brain is aging compared to other people. And if you've had any type of memory test or brain test at all, they always look at working memory, our ability to hold information in mind for a short period of time to complete a task. So that would be something like calculating a tip in your head. That would be one example of using working memory. They also test our attention span, our ability to focus. And focus is actually multiple circuits in the brain. It's our attention system, which is a number of circuits, and it also includes blocking distractions. So what they've learned over the last about 15 years ago in doing scans with people and doing testing, older adults still have the ability, those attention circuits are working. What we lose is the ability to block distractions. It's those distractions that cause us to lose focus and lose our ability to concentrate. The other thing we have trouble with, and this was about, 5-6 years ago at MIT, they discovered specific brain circuits for motivation, and in particular, our motivation to learn new things, learn new habits as we get older. But the good news is, thanks to neuroplasticity, our brain can change. Our brain can rewire itself. If we do some of these simple daily practices, I'll show you, if we do those daily, only for a few minutes, our brain can actually change and start rewiring and improve those critical skills. Now, the definition in your handout is a little bit different. I found another one later after I turned in the handout that I thought was cleaner. I never heard of this, but it's called Physiopedia, and it's medical terms. And so neuroplasticity, it's the ability of our neurons to modify those connections, to strengthen those connections, and then change those connections to improve our abilities. So it's when neurons change connections to function in some way different than it was functioning previously. And I'm going to show you a short little video here that will describe what these connections are. And I'm going to wait a few seconds because some people are still coming in. So you can, okay, she's got a seat. I didn't want to, so before I play the video, it's only 30 seconds long, and so it goes by really fast. I thought I would explain some of the language she's using, some of the terms, so that you understand the video better. But this is a brain cell, this little circle with all these extensions, and then it has one long extension. That's called an axon, and that axon, that nerve cells typically only have one of these. It's doing the talking, it's communicating to other brain cells. So this part of the cell up here, that's considered the body of the cell. So this circle here, and then all these connections, those are called dendrites. And so for instance, these dendrites, they're listening. So a nerve cell can have thousands of these, listening for information, listening to pick up information from other brain cells. So you have one long extension and talking to this huge neuron down here with all these other dendrites, reaching out, listening for information. This red circle in here is supposed to be represent the nucleus of the cell. That's where our genetic material is located. All of our DNA is in there, and instructions on what the cell is designed to do. So now when we go through the film, you can watch this in action. This part of the cell, see these connections here, that's what starts to disappear as we get older. So when they say your brain's shrinking, these dendrites here are shriveling up, and you don't have the connections kind of disappear. So like I said, by age 80, a lot of us have lost 25%. All right, now I'm gonna go do the film.
With each other, relaying messages throughout your body and powering all of your thoughts and actions. Neurons talk to each other using both electrical and chemical signals. Messages start as electrical signals traveling rapidly down a neuron. These signals are called action potentials. When they reach the gap between two neurons, the messages need some help to get across. The information is transformed from an action potential into a chemical message, which crosses the gap called a synapse. The release of those chemical messengers can trigger an action potential in the neuron on the other side of the synapse.
So you can see there, it's like a chain reaction. The signal goes from one neuron to another neuron to another neuron, and it forms a circuit. That's what they talk about with circuits. Okay, do you want me to play that again? Did you get it? All right. So this is the gap. That's where the two, so whenever people talk about connections, this is where they connect in the gap, and I'll do a blow up of that. So what's happening is the neuron that's talking is dumping a neurotransmitter, something like dopamine, for instance, into this gap, and the receiving nerve cell is picking up this information with receptors. Its receptors know to pick up this information, and let's say it's dopamine or serotonin or something like that, a neurotransmitter. So then what's the difference between connections and circuits? Well, when we talk about neural circuits, that is related to a specific task. It's a group of neurons that are working together to perform a specific task. So for example, focus is one of those tasks. Working memory is a task. Some of these circuits have thousands of neurons, some have millions of neurons in them. Now here's an example of focus. Focus is made up of multiple circuits, so we call that a network. And what you see here when somebody's in a scanner, what the operator is looking for is different parts of the brain light up. So they'll watch different parts of clusters of neurons in different sections of the brain will get activated and light up in a certain sequence. So they look at the sequence of this happening, and now they can tell the flow of neurotransmitters from one set of neurons to another one. And so that's how they can trace circuits through the brain, and they can actually see while you're in the scanner, they can give somebody something to do. They'll say, read this paragraph or focus on this really closely. And then they will see those circuits in action, and they'll know how well that person is functioning. So now, in order to focus, we have to go through certain steps. In order to get our brain to change, to rewire itself, to trigger neuroplasticity, it takes some work on our part. It doesn't just happen. You won't walk out of this room and all of a sudden your brain's different. I know you've heard that but that's not really true. We have to work at it. It takes some effort, and it takes not just specific circuits, but it takes specific chemicals in the brain that have to get released in a certain sequence. So this is just focus, just our ability to concentrate and pay attention really closely. So the first step here is to pay attention to something really closely. We're going to focus on it, pay close attention. What happens is that two brain chemicals get released, and they have to get released or we're not focusing. The first one is adrenaline, and its other name is epinephrine. You've probably heard one or both of those. They're both the exact same molecule, but same brain chemical. Adrenaline comes from adrenal glands, and epinephrine comes from neurons in the brain, but they're the same chemical. And we have to be alert. And also what happens is another chemical gets released. You don't have to remember these names, but acetylcholine. Another chemical gets released, and that's what blocks distractions. So it's like a spotlight. It targets a certain field that you're looking at, and it can block other information coming in. The last one is now you've got focus, you're paying attention to something, you want to hold your focus for a certain period of time, long enough to do that task, whatever it is, if you're reading the newspaper or whatever. In order to do that, dopamine is the next one that has to flow. And dopamine helps you continue. That's the molecule moving forward, continuing to stay in that particular situation. But again, it's not a spectator sport. You can't passively change. You can't watch something and your brain is changing. It takes a little bit of effort. And so one way to help you, though, is to use your visual system to help with focus. Because it turns out, how many of you heard that 30% of our brain, or 1/3 of our brain, is our visual system? 1/3. 1/3 of our brain is visual processing. And so our cognitive skills are tied together with our visual system. And wherever you're moving your eyes, your mental skills are coming along with it. So your mental abilities are kind of following your vision. And that's for sighted people. With people who can't see, it's a little bit different. They use their hearing more. But in any case, you can use your vision to help train your mental focus. And that's what we're going to do now. Oh, by the way, all this information on visual system and how it works with your mental activities in your brain, that's a lot of work done by a man by the name of Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscientist, and he's a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford. He's very popular on the internet. So I'm giving you his website if you want to. He does actual college lectures online. He has some shorter ones, but he explains it really well. So you have that in your handout. We have to give them credit for all of this. So here's a little exercise we're going to do in class. It's only 30 seconds long. And you can do this at home. At the end, we're going to hand out little timers for you to take with you. I have my timer here set for 30 seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a screen here that just has a star with a gold dot in the middle of it. And what you'll do is just focus on that dot and see how long you can hold it there. And if you do this on a daily basis at home, you start out doing it. See if you can hold your focus for 30 seconds. See if you can hold your focus without moving your gaze or moving if you move your mind, your gaze will sort of follow with it. So the idea is, how long can you concentrate on that particular spot? You breathe normally, you can blink, whatever, but all you do is hold it there for 30, set a timer and hold it for 30 seconds. And if that's easy to do, then the next morning, I do mine in the morning, but the next day, you can do it for 35 seconds. So you keep adding 5 seconds until you get up to about 2 minutes. If you get up to 2 minutes and you can hold your focus that long, then you don't have to do it every day. You could do it a few times a week or something. So let's practice now. Let me see here. All right. So I'm going to have you look at that. I'll step aside here, and I'm going to set the timer. And the people at home can do this if you want to. Just see if you can hold your focus. All right, let's see. Okay, everybody ready? Let's go. Oops. Oh, geez. Well, that didn't work. All right, well, the timer is going now. Let's see. Hang on. See if I can get it back up to 30 seconds. All right, put this down. All right, let's try again. Okay, we'll stare at the gold dot. Okay. How was that? It was hard? Okay, so you're going to get one of these timers to take with you. And whenever you do this at home, you could just put something on the table and just a plain object that you would stare at. And if it's harder, to try 30 seconds again tomorrow. And then when that gets easy to do, you add the 5 seconds. But even if you just keep doing this like a minute, if you work up to a minute every day, what's happening is you are really now triggering plasticity. You are marking those particular circuits in your brain to change. You're telling you want to be able to focus. And I should say that the actual change doesn't happen until you go to sleep. So part of this requirement, which we'll see here shortly, is that you need a good night's sleep. So it's when we're asleep is when those circuits start updating in our brain. They're marked, and they're supposed to change, but they don't actually change until you sleep. And if you miss a good night's sleep one night, even a few days later, it'll still get rewired. Okay. So that's just the entry point to being able to focus is opening the door to plasticity. Now to really make a change, to rewire your brain so that new habit that you want to learn, if you're trying to adopt some new healthy habit or if you want to learn one of the tools that we're going to talk in this class, in order to actually make changes in your brain, you have to go through some more steps. Start out with focus, and start out again with quality sleep, because you have to be alert. The first thing to get the right chemicals flowing is to be alert and have enough energy, and it's your brain's alertness. So you make sure you have sleep, raise your energy level, and then you focus on that task, whatever you're going to do. One of the things I'm trying to learn, give you an example, is backing my car into a parking space. And I have to do it over and over, because I'm still not, I want to be able to just drive into a parking lot and just pull right in and walk out with confidence. And I'm not there yet. So it's taking me about 2 turns, and this morning it took me 3 to get in. But in any case, I need to practice over and over. I'm going to make mistakes, but what's happening every time I do that, my nervous system gets a signal that acetylcholine is flowing. It gets a signal that something has to change here. And it is picking up little signals that something needs to change. And the trick is, though, to not give up and to push through that frustration. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes I get lazy and don't want to do it. But the idea, though, when you get small wins, when you do something even a little bit right, you get a flood of dopamine. And dopamine is the chemical of motivation. So it makes you want to continue. People think of it as reward, but dopamine is more about motivation, because once you get the reward, that's a lot of other brain chemicals like serotonin and oxytocin and stuff. Dopamine is the one that wants you to move forward and do something. The other thing about learning and neuroplasticity and changing your brain, anything new we want to learn, pickleball, or even if you want to adopt a healthy eating habit or something, it takes time. The idea is to break whatever you're trying to do up into smaller chunks, so that you're able to be successful and get those little wins. If it's pickleball, you don't want to play probably for more than 30 minutes if it's a training session. That's what they've done, study after study, for people as we get older after our 70s. It just takes us longer. We can't learn as much in a long session as we can if we break it out into smaller sessions. And then, of course, is to make sure we get a good night's sleep to allow those changes to occur. So most of us don't want to change. It's not fun. So what can we do to overcome that? Well, here are the success factors if you're trying to do anything or make any kind of new change in your life. It is about getting your brain alert. And sometimes, though, we're too alert, we're agitated, we can't slow our mind down. And if that happens, if you're just too hyped up about something and you can't calm down enough to focus, there's a trick, and you can use this if you're in a stressful situation in the moment to calm yourself down. It's a breathing technique. And I'm going to demonstrate it to you. What it is you take in a deep breath and then another little breath, and then you take a long breath out. And when you do that, it calms you down almost instantly. And if you're in a situation, you're stressed out for some reason, you do 3 of those in a row, and it will calm you down. It's the way it works with your heart rate and your diaphragm and everything. So I'm going to demonstrate it. It goes like this. So the breath coming out is longer. So breathe it in. Now, when you do that second breath, what happens is there's these little sacs in our lungs with carbon dioxide in them. And if you only do one breath, it doesn't quite get fully released. But when you do that second breath, it opens it up so that everything can flow out. Does that make sense? I won't make you practice that here. Okay, so then, of course, we talked about the size of the task. If you can get little wins when you're making the change, those successes, you get a flow of dopamine, and it attaches to those dopamine circuits. And then it's all about your mindset. How are you feeling about these changes you want to make? What are your thoughts about these changes you want to make? How do you get yourself motivated? And now that's where we get into dopamine. So as I mentioned back about 5 years or so ago, the MIT lab at MIT discovered specific circuits tied to motivation. And you see these two here, or these little ones in the middle. That's dopamine also has to do with movement. So those are about movement in there. But what we're looking at for motivation is this really long blue one here. And if you notice, when dopamine is released, it goes to large parts of the brain. It's different than many of the neurotransmitters. It's called a neuromodulator because it has an impact on a lot of neurons. So you can see the hippocampus here and the amygdala, that's our memory and our emotions. And then a big flood up here in the front part of our brain, that's our executive skills. So the levels of dopamine we have in our system affect a lot. They affect our mood, our ability to think, our ability to learn new things, our memory. It has a huge effect. And it's known as the molecule of motivation because it's mostly oriented towards making you move forward, making you desire things outside of you. So it's something that you want to move toward outside of yourself. Whereas, just to compare it to serotonin's more a hormone that says, I like what I have. I'm comfortable in my comfort zone here. And it's more internal. Serotonin is more liking what you have. Dopamine is about wanting something outside of you. So it reinforces habits where you're getting a reward. And one of the things about dopamine, which I should have mentioned on this slide, where I was talking about the changes in our brain, is that in addition to losing those neural circuits, we're also losing the brain chemicals, a number of our brain chemicals that are important for our well-being. And we actually lose a similar amount of dopamine. So after age 40, our baseline level of dopamine drops 5% a year. So by the time we're 80, we've lost about 40% of our baseline, because at any time we've got some amount of dopamine flowing through our brain. And so we're losing it. And then there are things we can do about it to improve it. So this is an example of somebody who has a high amount of dopamine. Genes do influence this, so some people just have more than others. And somebody who has a high amount of it is bouncing out of bed, ready to greet the day. I think of these as more extroverted people, but I don't know. But they're more goal-driven. They're really pushing forward. And somebody who has a really low level of dopamine will feel more lethargic and maybe not even want to get up out of bed. And maybe we might label them lazy. So what can we do about that? Well, it's interesting. This is how these chemicals, these main chemicals of well-being here, flow throughout the day. When we're looking at dopamine, as I said, it helps our learning and it makes us more motivated. Well, what's the best time of day to do some of these new habits or these things that we want to learn? With dopamine, it is at its highest level when we wake up in the morning and for the next 9 hours. So our baseline level is at its highest for the first 9 hours. So for me, I get up at 5 in the morning, and by about 2 o'clock then, it's already started to taper off. So when I exercise, I always do it in the morning because I just don't feel as motivated in the afternoon. In the morning is when we have less resistance. We can push through that resistance better when we're trying to do something new. And then as it gets more towards afternoon, that's when dopamine drops down, adrenaline drops down, and the serotonin levels start increasing. So that's when we feel more, some people call it the happy chemical. We feel when we have enough serotonin in our system, we feel calmer, happier, more satisfied with what we have. So we want to have a healthy level of serotonin as well. And then bedtime, then when you're dreaming or when you're asleep, everything's erratic. Your brain's changing a lot. So we're really not too concerned with that.
Coffee, 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 coffee.
Now, it turns out one of the ways to increase our level of dopamine is with caffeine in the morning. So whether it's tea or coffee, but if you, and this is of course not for people who are sensitive to caffeine. I mean, some people, there is a small percent of people who just can't handle caffeine very well. But for those of us who like coffee or tea, or as it turns out, it really does help raise that baseline level of dopamine. It gives us help. So if you're doing that on a daily basis, that's a good practice. And what they say, it depends on, when people ask how much, depends on how big you are. A bigger person can handle 2 or 3 cups, a smaller person 1 to 2 cups in the morning for coffee and tea. And what happens, the reason caffeine helps with that baseline level is because, remember the receptors that pick up the chemical here? Well, the more you consume caffeine, it actually increases the number of receptors on a cell. It increases the number of dopamine receptors so that you get more bang for your buck with the caffeine and with dopamine. So it's more, they say the efficacy is higher. It's more effective at using dopamine. Here are other ways to maintain the baseline level. As I mentioned, enough quality sleep. And now there's another practice that I'm going to show you that is really getting a lot of attention because it not only raises your baseline level of dopamine, it's shown to improve working memory, it's shown to improve mood and help people be more relaxed. It's called non-sleep deep rest. And what you do is you listen to a recording. It's a recording of somebody guiding you through breathing exercises, and then it's a guided body scan. So I'm going to just play a little bit of one of them. But in your handout, you have, it's free, it's on the internet. They found that after 13 minutes of just doing this exercise, people actually improved their mood, their memory, and other things. Another way to increase dopamine is by getting enough tyrosine. It's a chemical, and it's in a variety of different foods, a lot of different foods. So if you want to, you can Google this and see what foods are high in tyrosine. I listed a few of them. Another one is morning sunlight. That affects your circadian clock, but it also affects the level of dopamine that you get for the day. So this is being out in the sun, not staring into the sun, but just being outside without your sunglasses on for 10 to 20 minutes, you're resetting your clock, and that helps also elevate the level of dopamine. And then regular exercise, if you're in some morning walk or do some exercise program, that helps with dopamine. This little, well, I'll show it to you later, but this practice, this 13-minute guided practice that I'm going to show you, they found that it elevated dopamine as much as 65%, that baseline level. And that's our goal because, like I said, we've lost an awful lot. So that it's science backed. It came out of the laboratory. They've looked at people in scanners and they've tested all different ways, and they've really proven that these particular the working memory circuits are enhanced by doing this. Their ability to focus is enhanced. So I'm going to play, like I said, I'll play this for about 2 minutes just so you can listen to the voice and get an idea. Again, this is on YouTube. It's in your handout.
Inhale deeply through your nose or mouth, then exhale until your lungs are empty. Deep inhales followed by long exhales have a direct effect on the brain and body circuits that induce calm. Once again, inhale deeply through your nose or mouth, then exhale until your lungs are empty. One.
Okay, that's enough of that. But it gives you an idea of the sound of his voice. They call this non-sleep deep rest because you're kind of at the sweet spot where you're focused, but yet you almost feel so really relaxed. And that gets at those brain circuits that are our ability to focus and our ability to concentrate and also working memory. In fact, this was a separate study, but all related to the same thing. What they did is they took 2 groups of people. One group was, and they tested their working memory. They gave them a working memory test right before they did this exercise. And they had one group for 15 minutes listen to what I had just shown you, that little guided meditation. They had another group just listen to a lecture for 15 minutes. And what they found was while these people were doing this exercise, they could look, they had a couple of them in a scanner, and they could see what particular parts of the brain lit up, what nerve cells were active, what was those neural circuits that were active while they were listening to this recording and just following it along in their mind. They had their eyes closed, following it along, and they could see exactly what was happening inside their brain. Now, the other group, they looked at their brains during their listening to a lecture or a podcast or something. Different parts of the brain. It wasn't the ones that really they had zeroed in on for working memory. So then when they were finished after 15 minutes, they did another test. And just after 15 minutes now, the group that listened to that guided imagery had improvements on their test. They showed improvements. And the other group had actually gotten a little worse. They didn't do as well. But now, so the thing is, they could see that there is an effect. Now, it's not going to stick because you'd have to practice this over and over again to get neuroplasticity and really make it stick. But they did find that after 8 weeks, their brains had changed. After 8 weeks, those circuits had changed. And their memory had improved pretty significantly. Their focus had improved. So anyway, you have this, you get the address, you have the YouTube address where you can go listen to this yourself. Like I said, the one that I'm giving you is 23 minutes long, but you can set your timer if you don't want to do it that long. The last thing I wanted to mention during my talk, because we're talking about tools here, is grip strength. Now there's an instrument you can buy, and you may have done this in your doctor's office, and some people have, that you squeeze this little hand gripper. When you squeeze it, it measures the strength of it's actually measuring the strength of this muscle. But that strength of that muscle is a predictor, it's a good indicator of what your muscle strength is all over your body. And so you get a measurement, and the doctors will do it, or your physical therapist or whatever, to get an idea of frailty They'll put you on a scale. Are you getting frail, or are you strong enough to be independent, and so forth. But the other thing that they learned is it's also a predictor of your cognitive function, how well your brain is doing with all of these different cognitive skills that I mentioned. And it's very, very strong evidence that how well you do on that grip strength is a prediction of how well your brain is doing, is healthy overall. So I bought one of these just to try it, so that they're on Amazon. They're about $25. So if you're interested, and I think are we giving out the little foot brains? So what we're going to do at the end here, when you get the timers, we're giving out a little, looks like a brain. It's a little ball that you can squeeze so you can practice and improve your grip strength. So this is my last chart before Michelle gets up here, but in order, go ahead.
Well, you also had on that screen walking speed. What were you going to say about that?
Oh, walking speed. Okay, so what they also test your walking speed to see. They used to do that pretty much exclusively, but they learned that by testing grip strength, it's actually more accurate than your walking speed to tell how well you're doing physically and cognitively. But thanks for pointing that out. Okay, so the last chart. Question to ask yourself, I said mindset is important, is if you want to do something new, if you're going to go home and you're debating about whether you're even going to bother using any of these tools, ask yourself, why would I? Why is it important? What's driving you? Any kind of healthy habits you want to add to your life. It all depends on your motivation, what it is. Come up with reasons and try to work on that mindset and your thoughts towards whatever it is you want to change. Some people, me, for instance, I want to stay independent throughout my lifespan. So that's what drives me. I don't want to depend on somebody else to take care of me as I age. So I'm doing a lot of different things, including this stuff. I do these every day. I do the focus one, and I do this 13-minute meditation exercise. So that's all I had. I'll turn it back over. I guess Maya's going to see if there's any questions.
So thank you, Jill. Hold on just a second here. I'm going to pull this down so I can see you. Good. Okay. So I did have a question, and actually everybody online is very interested. They want to get the copies of those links so that they can also go back and watch as well afterwards. So we'll be sure to do that to everybody who's registered. So thank you for that. Can you give us some tips on focusing when you have so many outside, maybe environmental factors that are causing distractions going on around you?
That's really an excellent question, and we were discussing it here at one of our tables. And really, you have kind of a responsibility to set up an environment where you have fewer and fewer distractions. Now, it may not be time to focus when you have a child screaming for something to eat. You have your husband saying, I'm home, or it's whatever. You need to have, if you really want to learn and you really want to focus, look at your environment, because as Jill said in her speech, we lose our ability to get rid of the distractions. So we really have to help ourselves control the environment, especially in the beginning, to eliminate some of the distractions so that we can focus. Jill?
Yeah, also, just doing that little exercise every morning, you can test yourself. I mean, I bet it was easy for some people, right?
Right. to focus on the dot. Yeah. So, okay. So that's something we just need to do and really get. And I know, I'm guilty of it, just like so many people. There's just so much going on, and so you're constantly multitasking, and so being able to dedicate directly to one task
And you don't multitask well. No one, even a 20-year-old. So just remember that as you beat yourself on the back because you're
Right.
multitasking. It's
Good. All right. I want to thank you both for being here today. I know we had a very large online audience as well that was following along. Again, anyone who's watching will go ahead and share the presentation afterwards for you as well. And I'll wrap this up. So thank you very much. Thanks so much for being here. I hope you'll join us for our next presentation, which is next week. On Tuesday, April 25th at 10 a.m., we will have Take Charge of Your Healthcare, and that will be with Carly Perez from our TMC Hospice. Please give us a call in the office if you would like the link or would like to register to come in person for the class. The phone number is 520-324-1960. Thanks so much.